Have you ever wondered what it actually takes to become a billionaire? Not just a rich person, not just a successful musician, but an actual certified, comma-heavy billionaire. Because most people hear the name Rihanna and they immediately think music. They think umbrella, they think diamonds. They think that iconic Super Bowl halftime performance where she literally floated above the stage while pregnant and somehow still managed to look like she owned the entire universe. And she does, kind of. But here is the thing that most people still do not fully grasp, and it is something that genuinely shocked me when I started digging into the numbers. Rihanna has not released an album since 2016. That is a full decade without new music. No tours, no studio albums, nothing. And in that same time period, she has built one of the most remarkable business empires in modern history. So today we are going to break down exactly what is happening with that empire right now, the updates that most people have completely missed, and why the story of Rihanna's business journey might be the most important success story of our generation. And I promise you, by the end of this video, you are going to see her in a completely different way. Let us start from the beginning because context matters here. Rihanna grew up in Barbados. She was not born into wealth. She was not handed a business degree or a trust fund or a network of powerful connections. What she had was talent, an extraordinary work ethic, and eventually a massive platform. When she signed with Def Jam Recordings as a teenager, most people assumed the trajectory was obvious. Make music, become famous, do some endorsement deals, maybe launch a fragrance at some point like every other celebrity of that era, and ride that wave until it eventually crashes. But Rihanna looked at that path and decided it was not ambitious enough. The first thing you need to understand about how she built her empire is that she did not just put her name on products. That distinction is everything. So many celebrities slap their name on a product, take a check and call it a day. Rihanna went in a completely different direction. When she launched Fenty Beauty in 2017, she did it in partnership with LVMH, which is the luxury conglomerate that owns brands like Louis Vuitton and Dior. And she did not just partner with them. She co-founded the brand. She was in the creative meetings. She was involved in the product development. She was the one who looked at the makeup industry and said, "Why are there only 12 foundation shades when there are billions of people on this planet with dramatically different skin tones?" That question, which sounds almost embarrassingly obvious in hindsight, was actually revolutionary. Fenty Beauty launched with 40 foundation shades. 40. The industry standard at the time was nowhere close to that, and the response was immediate and enormous. The brand made over $100 million in its first 40 days. Let me say that again. $100 million in 40 days. That is not a business launch, that is a cultural earthquake. Now fast forward to where we are today, and this is where the updates get really interesting. Fenty Beauty has continued to grow and evolve in ways that go far beyond that initial foundation launch. The brand has expanded its product range significantly, moving deeper into skincare, lip products, and eye makeup. But the more fascinating development is what has been happening structurally with the business itself. Reports have indicated that the valuation of Fenty Beauty has been extraordinary, contributing massively to Rihanna's overall net worth, which has been estimated at well over $1 billion, making her one of the wealthiest musicians on the planet and placing her in a very exclusive category of self-made billionaires. But here is where a lot of people make a mistake when they analyze Rihanna's business empire. They stop at Fenty Beauty. And that is only part of the story. Savage X Fenty is the other massive piece of this puzzle, and it has been going through some really significant changes lately that deserve serious attention. For those who are not familiar, Savage X Fenty is Rihanna's lingerie brand that she launched in 2018. And once again, she did not just create a lingerie brand, she created a statement. The traditional lingerie market had for decades been dominated by a very specific aesthetic and a very specific idea of who lingerie was for. Savage X Fenty came in and said that lingerie is for everyone. Every body type, every size, every background. The runway shows, if you can even call them that, became these massive cultural events that blended fashion with music and performance in ways nobody had seen before. The brand grew rapidly and attracted serious investor attention. It received significant funding rounds that propelled it toward a potential public offering. There was a period where an IPO seemed almost certain, and the brand was being valued in the billions. Now the business landscape has shifted somewhat, and this is one of the updates that has been making headlines. The IPO plans have faced some turbulence. The broader economic environment, changing retail conditions, and the challenges that come with scaling a direct-to-consumer brand in a competitive market have all created headwinds. But here is what I find genuinely fascinating about how this situation has been handled. Rather than simply scaling back, the brand has been refocusing and recalibrating. New leadership and strategic shifts have been implemented as Savage X Fenty tries to navigate toward profitability and long-term sustainability. The story is not over. It is actually at one of its most interesting chapters right now. And this brings me to a psychological point that I think is really important when we talk about business empires in general. Most people look at a business that is going through challenges, and they immediately read that as failure. But the most sophisticated business observers understand that recalibration is not the same as retreat. Every single major business that you can think of, every empire that has stood the test of time, has gone through periods of difficulty and restructuring. The question is never whether challenges arise, the question is how they are navigated. And Rihanna's track record suggests she understands this at a very deep level. Let us talk about the third major pillar of her empire, which is Fenty Skin. This launched in 2020, and it represented something really significant in terms of how Rihanna was thinking about her brand ecosystem. Fenty Skin was designed from the start to be gender neutral. It was not marketed specifically to women. The products were created for anyone who has skin, which as it turns out is all of us. The launch campaign featured Rihanna alongside her then partner, and the messaging was very clear. Taking care of your skin is not a gendered activity. It is just taking care of yourself. The timing was interesting too, launching a skincare brand in 2020, right in the middle of a global pandemic, could have been a disaster, but in some ways it was actually perfectly timed. People were at home paying more attention to their skin, spending more time on self-care routines, and the skincare market was actually booming in that unusual environment. Fenty Skin managed to carve out a real position in an incredibly crowded market, which is no small feat. Now I want to step back and talk about something that does not get discussed enough, which is the strategic genius of how these businesses interconnect. Fenty Beauty, Savage X Fenty, and Fenty Skin are not just separate brands that happen to share a name. They are a carefully constructed ecosystem. Each one reaches a slightly different aspect of a consumer's life and daily routine, and they all share that core brand identity built around inclusivity, quality, and authenticity. When someone becomes a fan of Fenty Beauty because of the foundation shade range, they are also a potential customer for Fenty Skin. When someone discovers Savage X Fenty because of the incredible runway performances, they are also being introduced to the broader Fenty universe. This is not accidental. This is sophisticated brand architecture. There is also something happening at the LVMH level that is worth paying attention to. LVMH is one of the most powerful luxury conglomerates in the world, and their partnership with Rihanna on Fenty Beauty has been notable. The relationship represents a kind of validation and infrastructure that goes beyond just money. Having LVMH's distribution networks, their retail relationships, their manufacturing expertise, and their global reach behind a brand is an enormous advantage. And from LVMH's perspective, the partnership has given them access to a demographic and a cultural conversation that traditional luxury brands have sometimes struggled to reach authentically. There was also, you might remember, a Fenty fashion house that was announced under LVMH. This was genuinely historic because Rihanna became the first woman to create an original brand at LVMH and the first black woman to lead a major fashion house. The fashion house paused its operations in 2021, which was a significant moment that drew a lot of attention. But here is the nuance that a lot of coverage missed. Pausing is not the same as closing. The infrastructure, the intellectual property, the creative foundation, all of that remains. And given Rihanna's track record of making strategic moves that sometimes look confusing in the short term but make complete sense in retrospect, there are a lot of industry observers who believe the fashion house story is not finished. Let me also talk about something that I think gets lost in all the business discussion, and that is the human element of what Rihanna has actually accomplished. Think about what it means for a black woman from Barbados to walk into the corridors of LVMH and co-create brands that reshape entire industries. Think about what it means for a generation of young entrepreneurs, particularly young women of color, to see someone who looks like them not just succeeding in business, but genuinely changing the rules of the game. The cultural impact of Rihanna's business journey goes far beyond revenue figures and valuation numbers. She has shifted what people believe is possible. And that brings me to the music question, because we cannot have a full conversation about Rihanna's empire without addressing the elephant that has been sitting in the room for the better part of a decade. Where is the music? When is the album coming? Here is what we actually know. Rihanna has spoken in various interviews over the years about working on music. She has said she does not want to just put out something for the sake of putting it out. She has indicated that she wants the next musical chapter to be genuinely meaningful and intentional. And in the meantime, her business empire has been her primary creative and professional focus. She became a mother, and by all accounts that has deepened her sense of purpose and further complicated the timeline for a musical return. But here is the business angle that most people miss. The longer she waits, the bigger the event becomes. Every day that passes without a Rihanna album is another day that the anticipation builds. And when she does eventually release music, it will be one of the most commercially significant musical events in recent memory. She is not just an artist sitting on unfinished work. She is a billionaire businesswoman who understands brand value and timing at a level that most music executives could learn from. The silence is strategic. At least that is the most logical interpretation of what we are watching. Now let us talk about some of the more recent developments that have been generating attention. There have been discussions and reports about the evolving landscape of Fenty Beauty's distribution and retail strategy. The brand has been expanding its presence in international markets, recognizing that the inclusivity message resonates deeply with consumers in regions where mainstream beauty brands have historically been even worse at representing diverse skin tones. Markets across Africa, Asia, and Latin America represent enormous potential for a brand built explicitly around the idea that beauty products should work for everyone. There have also been conversations about how Fenty Beauty is positioning itself in the era of social media-driven beauty. The landscape that the brand launched into in 2017 was already heavily influenced by YouTube beauty gurus and Instagram influencers, but the social media environment in 2026 looks dramatically different, with short-form video content and entirely new platforms reshaping how beauty brands build and maintain relevance. Fenty Beauty has had to adapt and evolve its digital strategy, and from what has been observable in the market, it has done so with considerable skill. One of the things that has been genuinely impressive about the Fenty brand portfolio is how it has managed to maintain authenticity even as it has scaled enormously. There is a very common pattern in celebrity-founded businesses where the brand feels real and genuine in its early days and then gradually becomes more corporate and disconnected as it grows. The celebrity founder becomes less involved, the decisions get made by committees, and the original spark that made the brand special slowly fades. Rihanna has been deliberate about staying connected to the creative direction of her brands in a way that has helped prevent that drift. Let us also acknowledge something that has been happening in the broader luxury and beauty market that provides important context for understanding Rihanna's empire right now. The past few years have been genuinely challenging for many brands across the board. Inflation, changing consumer behavior, the hangover from pandemic-era spending patterns, and increased competition in virtually every category have created difficult conditions. Even very well-established luxury brands have reported softer results in certain markets. Understanding that Rihanna's businesses are operating in this broader environment is important for reading the headlines accurately. Challenges that might look alarming in isolation are often industry-wide realities when seen in proper context. What distinguishes the strongest brands in challenging environments is usually a combination of clear identity, genuine consumer loyalty, and operational discipline. And the Fenty brand portfolio, despite the headwinds it has faced, has demonstrated those qualities in ways that separate it from celebrity vanity projects that cannot survive when conditions get tough. I want to spend a moment on what all of this means for the future, because I think that is actually the most exciting part of this story. Rihanna is still relatively young. She is in her mid-30s. She has built a multi-billion-dollar empire in under a decade, while also becoming a mother and remaining one of the most famous people on the planet. The trajectory from here could go in almost any direction, and that is genuinely exciting to think about. There are reasonable expectations that the Fenty universe will continue to expand, whether that means new product categories, new geographic markets, new partnerships, or entirely new ventures that nobody has predicted yet. The infrastructure and brand equity that exist provide an extraordinary foundation. The LVMH relationship, even with the fashion house pause, represents an ongoing connection to one of the most powerful networks in global luxury. That does not just disappear. There is also the inevitability of a musical return at some point, and when that happens, it will be interesting to see how the music and the business empire interact. Will she tour? Will there be a Fenty product launch timed to coincide with new music? Will the business infrastructure she has built create opportunities for her musical comeback that would not have existed otherwise? The possibilities are genuinely fascinating. There is also the philanthropic dimension of Rihanna's work that deserves mention. The Clara Lionel Foundation, which she established and named after her grandparents, has been doing significant work in areas including climate resilience and education. As her wealth has grown, so has the scale of what she can do through this foundation, and that represents another layer of impact that goes beyond the business metrics. What I keep coming back to when I think about the full picture of Rihanna's empire is this. She has done something that very few people have managed to do. She has taken massive personal fame and transformed it into durable institutional value. A lot of celebrities get famous. A handful of them make a lot of money from that fame, but very few of them build something that could theoretically outlast the fame itself. Fenty Beauty does not depend on Rihanna releasing a hit song to succeed. Savage X Fenty does not need her to go on tour to sell products. These businesses have their own momentum, their own customer base, their own identity. That is what separates a true business empire from a celebrity brand deal. So the next time someone asks you what Rihanna has been up to, you now have a much more complete answer than most people do. She has been building something unprecedented. She has been rewriting what it looks like to transition from entertainer to entrepreneur. She has been proving, with real numbers and real results, that the old model of celebrity capitalism, where the famous person is just the face on the bottle, is not the only model. You can actually build the bottle. You can build the factory. You can build the whole thing. And the updates to her empire that are happening right now, the recalibrations, the expansions, the strategic shifts, these are not signs of a story in decline. They are signs of a story in its middle chapters. The most interesting parts are still ahead. If you found this breakdown valuable and you want more content that goes deep on the business stories behind the biggest names in culture, do yourself a favor and subscribe right now, because we are just getting started. And drop a comment below telling me which part of Rihanna's business journey surprised you the most. I genuinely read every single comment, and I would love to know what stood out to you. See you in the next one.